Welcome back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the sine and cosine ratio to find an angle. Very, very different, okay? So it's asking us to use the appropriate ratio to calculate the angle measure. Well, which angle measure do they mean? In this one, I think they mean A. So they want us to find this angle. Well, that's 90. That makes this the hypotenuse. To angle A, that makes this side opposite. And to angle A, that makes this adjacent. Then stop and think about what you're doing. I want to use a trig ratio to find angle A that uses opposite and hypotenuse. Well, that's going to be sine. So sine of angle A is going to be opposite divided by hypotenuse. So sine of angle A is going to be 10 divided by 15. Sine of angle A is equal to 0.666. Repeating all the way on. Now, if we think about this for a minute, what we have here is a side length ratio. That's the ratio between the opposite side over the hypotenuse side. And you want to find an angle. So we need to use the inverse. And that inverse is sine inverse. And that's the symbol for it. It's not an exponent, it's the symbol for the inverse. So what I suggest that we do is we go and we write angle A equals sine inverse. Now we have a choice. I can write out that entire decimal. And you better put in as many sixes as your calculator will hold. Because if you don't, then it's going to round it, and our answer is going to be a little bit off. Or we can say the inverse and put in the fraction and let the calculator do the work. Now I'm more inclined to do this. So what that means I'm going to do is 10 divided by 15 equals shift second function, and angle A is going to be equal to approximately 42 degrees. And that's how I'm going to do a question like that. Okay, so I have another one here that I think that we'll finish off with, and then I'll give you some work to do. So it's asking for an unknown angle measure. Well, there's actually two angles here. And why don't we find both of them just for fun? Why don't we make this A? Why don't we make this B? Why don't we make this the 90? And why don't we find both angle A and angle B? This is the hypotenuse. Now, I have to pick one to go after first. Let's go after angle A first. So from angle A, this will be the adjacent. I almost wrote opposite. That would be wrong. This is the adjacent side. This would be opposite for angle A. Now, what do we want? You want to find an angle. What do you have? You have an opposite. You have an adjacent. Which trig ratio uses adjacent and hypotenuse? You're going to have to learn this. At the very least, you're going to have to learn this. Spell it right. If you spell it wrong, everything falls apart. Adjacent and hypotenuse, here it is. So it's going to be cosine of angle A is going to be adjacent, which is 5 over 20. Notice that this is a ratio going to an angle. So angle A is going to equal the inverse of 5 divided by 20. So 5 divided by 20 equals second function cosine, and I get about 76 degrees. Now, that means that this is 76 degrees. If I want to find angle B, I could use trigonometry, or you know that the angle sum of any triangle is 180 degrees. So in other words, this angle, and this angle have to add up to 180. So therefore, your angle B is going to be 180 minus the 90 and minus the 76. So 90 minus the 76, you're going to get angle B is approximately 14 degrees. and I was able to get that one not using SOHCAHTOA, but using the short form for sum of an angle theorem, ASTT. All right, I think we'll stop there, and we'll give you some work to do out of your textbook.